In the heart of the kingdom of NRI, where the earth was the color of rust and the spirits of the ancestors whispered through the Irako trees, lived a woman whose name, Nneka, meant, "My mother is supreme." She was the jewel of her village, a young woman of breathtaking grace and quiet resolve. Her skin was the shade of polished mahogany, and her eyes, large and deep-set, held a wisdom that belied her 20 years. She was the village's last Adiz, a maiden specifically trained for the sacred role of the Ezenwanyi, the queen priestess. But the most defining and most discussed feature of Nneka was her virginity. In a society that revered fertility and celebrated the swift passage to womanhood, Nneka had remained untouched. This was not a personal choice, but a spiritual mandate. The Ezenwanyi, it was said, must be a vessel of pure earth, untainted by man, ready to receive the communal spirit of the land. The title she carried, however, was tinged with an unbearable irony. Nneka was a virgin, yes, but she carried a past. A silent, heavy stone lodged beneath the perfect smoothness of her public persona. Nneka's past had happened 5 years before, not in NRI, but in a distant, fever-ridden trading town called Otucha. Her family had moved there following the ill-fated venture of her father, a brilliant but impractical sculptor who believed he could sell his ancestor masks to the Portuguese traders. Otucha was a place of shadows and secrets, where the air smelled of stale palm wine and desperation. It was here, during a season of great famine, that a sickness, not of the body, but of the heart, had afflicted Nneka's older sister, Amara. Amara, wild and desperate to escape their poverty, had run away with a wealthy, cruel man from the coast. Nneka, a bright-eyed 15-year-old, was tasked by her grieving mother, Ezen, to bring her sister home. The journey was a blur of fear and determination. When Nneka finally found Amara, she was broken, sheltered in a small, windowless hut. She was also with child, and the father, the cruel man, had abandoned her. Amara begged Nneka to hide her shame, to protect her from the judgment of the Umwada, the daughters of the lineage, whose collective scorn could shatter a family. In her desperation, Amara had made a bargain. She would allow the child to be born, but Nneka must promise on the ancestral staff to raise the child as her own, claiming she had been promised to a spirit husband, and the child was his offspring, born into the village under a veil of sacred mystery. Nneka refused. She had been trained since birth to reject lies, to be the living embodiment of truth. The ancestors demand the truth. Amara, Nneka had pleaded. But when Amara, weakened by fever, placed a tiny newborn boy in her arms, a silence fell upon Nneka. She looked into the dark, trusting eyes of the infant, and in that moment, the future Ezenwanyi, the virgin who would uphold the purity of the kingdom, made a choice that fractured her soul. She gave her sister her solemn promise. The lie was forged, iron-strong and unbreakable. Nneka returned to NRI not long after, alone, and with a terrible story. Amara, she told the Umwada, had died of a mysterious wasting illness, and the infant, Chibuzo, God is the way, was the Nwadiana, the sacred son of a distant relation, entrusted to Nneka's care. The Umwada, suspicious but bound by tradition to respect the dead, questioned her relentlessly. But Nneka's resolve, honed by years of spiritual training, was flawless. Her eyes never wavered, her voice never shook. She was declared a virtuous, if unusual, caretaker. 5 years passed. Nneka now lived in the Obi palace, tending to the spiritual needs of the people, her training for the Ezenwanyi role nearing completion. Chibuzo, a cheerful, talkative boy of 5, believed Nneka was his aunt, and Amara was merely a spirit sister who watched over them. But the king, Igwe Okafor, was a man of modern sensibilities and old suspicions. He respected the tradition of the Ezenwanyi, but he questioned Nneka's unique circumstances. Why did the most sacred maiden in NRI have a child living under her roof? He summoned her to his private chamber. The air was thick with the scent of burning incense and royal authority. Nneka, the Igwe began, his voice a low rumble. You are the purest vessel in NRI, yet you carry a shadow. Chibuzo, his presence is a distraction. a dissonance in the sacred song of your life. Nneka knelt, her spine straight. Egui, the child is not mine. He is the orphan of a tragedy, given to me by my mother before her passing. He is a testament to my charity, not my compromise. Charity, the king mused, tapping his ceremonial staff. Or a cunning lie. The ancestors are watchful, Nneka. The Ezenwanyi must be pristine. Your past, your movements in Otucha, the death of your sister. They are too neat, too conveniently sealed. He presented her with an unexpected challenge. Tomorrow you will go before the Ofo, the ancestral staff of truth, and swear an oath. You will swear that you know nothing of the true father or mother of Chibuzo. If the Ofo accepts your oath, I will silence the skeptics forever. If it rejects it, your purity is questioned, and NRI will find a new Adiz. Nneka felt the blood drain from her face. The Ofo was not a mere stick. It was the embodiment of the ancestors' judgment. To lie upon it was to invite spiritual death. She knew, with chilling certainty, that it would expose her. It would not merely brand her a liar, but betray her sister's memory and disgrace the innocent child. That night, Nneka paced the moonlit courtyard of her compound. The Irako trees stood like silent sentinels, watching her torment. She reviewed the past 5 years. She had borne the shame, the sidelong glances, the whispers of the Umwada. She had sacrificed her chance for a normal life, her very identity, to protect Amara's secret. She had become the perfect priestess, chaste, devout, selfless, all while carrying a foundational, life-altering lie. She realized the lie had, in a twisted way, made her. The constant, agonizing fear of exposure had sharpened her devotion, making her spiritual practice fierce and absolute. She had to be perfect because she was imperfect. Then she understood. The choice was not between telling the truth and protecting the lie. The choice was between spiritual death, lying upon the Ofo, and communal death, telling the truth and destroying her sister's memory and the boy's future. There was a third path. She would not lie. She would not reveal her sister's shame. She would use the very thing that saved her sister, her fierce devotion to NRI's sacred traditions. At dawn, the village square was packed. The Egui sat on his throne, his face severe. The Umwada, led by the matriarch Mama Azuka, stood to the side, their expressions a mixture of triumph and malice. The sacred Ofo, wrapped in white cloth, was placed on a low, wooden altar. Nneka entered, dressed in the ceremonial white of the Adiz, her head held high. She saw Chibuzo standing with her maid, confused and wide-eyed. She knelt before the Egui, then rose and walked to the altar. The air was silent, heavy with expectation. Nneka, the Egui intoned, do you swear, before the ancestors and this sacred Ofo, that you are without sin, and that the child Chibuzo has no ties of blood to your sister Amara, or any man known to you? Nneka took a deep breath. She did not reach for the Ofo. Instead, she performed a sequence of movements that hadn't been seen in NRI for generations. The Omadam Thi, the ritual of self-cleansing. She spoke, her voice clear and strong, cutting through the tense silence. Egui Okafor, Umwada, my people, I am asked to swear upon the Ofo, but I stand before you as Nneka, the Adiz, the vessel of truth. I cannot swear a false oath. A gasp rippled through the crowd. Mama Azuka stepped forward, her eyes blazing. She confesses. She is a liar. Nneka raised her hand, silencing her. I confess nothing, Mama Azuka. I merely state a simple truth. No Adiz should ever swear an oath to prove her purity to man. Her purity is proven only to the spirits. She continued, weaving a powerful spell of tradition. The Ezenwanyi is not purified by a spoken word, but by a chosen sacrifice. My life, my choices, my virginity are my oath. But to satisfy the doubts of the Egui and the Umwada, I shall make a greater sacrifice than any oath. She turned and faced the rising sun. My sister, Amara, was broken by this world. She entrusted me with a secret that would have destroyed her, and through her, destroyed my family's honor. a secret I carried, not to deceive, but to protect. She looked directly at the Igwe. The Igwe asks me to choose between a life of truth and a life of purity. I refuse to choose. I choose the path of the ancestors. Then, Nneka announced her sacrifice. I shall not swear on the Ofo. Instead, I shall spend the next 7 days and 7 nights in the sacred Agbala Nri, the ancestral grotto, without food or water, performing the Igba Mbagbunso, the sacred vow of separation. In this vigil, I will invite the ancestors to judge me. They will strike me down if I am impure, or they will bless me if my intentions were just. If I survive, my past is cleansed, my sister's honor is restored, and my fitness for Ezenwanyi is proven by the divine, not the human court. This was a challenge the Igwe could not refuse. The Igba Mbagbunso was a near-fatal ancient ritual, rarely performed. It demanded a spiritual strength few possessed. If Nneka survived, her legitimacy would be unshakable. If she died, her past sins would die with her, and the kingdom would simply move on. The Agbala Nri was a dark, cool cave at the base of the sacred hill, where the first kings of Nri were buried. It was a place where the veil between the living and the dead was thin. For 7 days Nneka endured. The solitude was agonizing. The hunger was a dull, constant ache. But it was the silence that was the loudest. In the dark, she finally had to face the lie. Not the what of the lie that Chibuzo was her sister's son, but the why. She hadn't just protected her sister. She had protected herself from the failure of her family. She had used Amara's tragedy to solidify her own perfect, untouchable position in the village. Her purity was a shield against the world's judgment. On the 5th day, as her body weakened, a vision came. She saw Amara, not broken, but radiant, standing with the ancestors. Nneka, my sister. Amara's voice echoed in her mind. You sacrificed your truth for my freedom. That is love, not a lie. The path of the Ezenwanyi is not about being untouched. It is about being unbroken in the service of your people. Go back to them. Let the past become the ground on which your future stands. Nneka woke on the 7th day, not weakened, but imbued with a strange, fierce energy. She had faced her past, accepted the complexity of her truth, and emerged whole. She had gone into the grotto a virgin with a secret. She emerged a queen priestess with a purpose. When Nneka emerged from the grotto, sunlight blinding her, the entire village was waiting. She was pale, skeletal, but her eyes held the steady, intense light of one who had spoken with the spirits. The Igwe and the Umwada knelt instantly. No human could survive the Igba Mbagbunso without the express blessing of the ancestors. Her ordeal had served as a trial by fire, a ritualistic obliteration of her past shame. The lie was not forgiven. It was simply rendered irrelevant by divine authority. The Igwe rose, his voice now deferential. Nneka, the spirits have spoken. Your past is cleansed. You are pure. Nneka looked down at her people. She walked to Chibuzo, who rushed to her side. She placed her hand on his head. The ancestors have taught me this, she announced to the village, her voice amplified by her ordeal. Purity is not the absence of a past, but the acceptance of a future. I will serve Nri not as a perfect virgin, but as an unbroken vessel. I will carry the burdens of my people, as I carried the burden of my sister's sorrow. She was crowned the Ezenwanyi. Nneka's reign was long and prosperous. She was a stern but compassionate leader, her decisions guided not just by tradition, but by the painful wisdom she had earned in Otucha. The kingdom flourished under the guidance of a woman who was technically still a virgin, yet who had known the weight of motherhood, the sting of sacrifice, and the complexity of truth. Chibuzo grew up in the palace, loved and protected by his aunt. He eventually learned the truth, not through gossip, but from Nneka herself, on his 18th birthday. Your mother was a brave woman, my sister, Nneka told him. And you, Chibuzo, are the living proof that a lie told in love can sometimes carry more truth than the harsh honesty of the world. The past was never fully forgotten, but it was understood. Nneka the Virgin remained the sacred title, But the whispers that followed it, with a past, had changed their meaning. They no longer spoke of shame, but of endurance, sacrifice, and the profound, complex purity of a human heart.